All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Colonel Will Makugai. I am the J65 Plans, Strategy, and EMS Division Chief working at Camp Smith, U.S. Indo-PACOM. Today we're going to do the Electromagnetic Operational Environment panel. We're talking spectrum dominance. We were impacted a little bit by the government shutdown, so we have this is the A+ team. We had to bring in some of the ringers. I don't have much spectrum experience, but between the panel members here, we've got decades of experience. So I'm very excited about talking spectrum. EMS, for those of you who don't know, is really foundational to communications, to command and control, for the military, for a lot of the critical functions that support military operations. So I see a lot of ROTC. Regardless of what your level of spectrum or EMS knowledge is, you'll probably gain something out of this panel this morning. So I've kind of talked about myself a little bit. I'm going to pass it just down the row, starting from Mr. Dave Harris, and we'll have the panel members introduce themselves, where they're from, and maybe say a little something about your background.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Harris. I'm from the Navy Marine Corps Spectrum Office Pacific, also known as NMCSO PAC. Our headquarters is NMSC out of Fort George E. Meade up in D.C. area. Myself, I've been in spectrum management, for 37 years. I really enjoy it. It has a lot of changes, and I really see a lot of changes coming up for us. That's all I have.
Aloha. My name is Bob Marcial. I'm the Chief Spectrum Manager for Indo-PACOM. I've been in the spectrum management business for 46 years. Boo. Okay. And I've been at PACOM for 28 years. And for the last 46 years, I've done nothing but spectrum management. Thank you.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Lawrence Orlowski. I'm the branch chief for U.S. Army Pacific G636. We're dual function. We're spectrum management, operations, and also satellite communications management. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's especially a profound privilege to be here on this panel, to speak with you today, and to speak with my counterparts here on the panel. I'm joined today by Sergeant Major Billy Kelly, whom you'll meet here momentarily, and Master Sergeant Stephen Schroeder, our Army Spectrum Chief, in the audience. Really looking forward to this. My experience dates back to approximately 2004, at which point I became an Army Spectrum Manager in my active duty service. After retirement in 2017, I had the extraordinary privilege to join the U.S. Army Pacific team, where I've been for about 6 years now as a member of the Spectrum Management Branch. So again, really looking forward to this opportunity, and thanks in advance for your participation.
Good morning. I'm Chief Tyler Reese. I'm with the Commander Pacific Fleet here at our Makalapa compound. I've been doing spectrum management since 2017, so probably one of the least experienced on this panel. A little bit nervous about that, but here making sure the Navy is represented in this panel.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Sergeant Major Billy Kelly. I'm also with USRPAC G6, along with Mr. Orlowski over there. I've been doing spectrum management for approximately 13 years now. Started as an infantryman, reclassed back in 2012, and it's good to come out and talk to the audience today. So send up your questions. We're ready to answer them. All
right, so we do have representation, if you didn't hear it, from every service minus Spacecom and the Coast Guard. So thank you for all the members. Thank you for attending today, to all the guests and members here. I'm just going to go through some quick questions. We'll get through those. We'll give our panelists an opportunity to answer, and then if we have time at the end, we'll open it up to audience questions. So first question is how does spectrum superiority directly enable the effectiveness of networked C4 ISR systems, and what are the consequences of operating in a spectrum contested or denied environment? C4 ISR, for those of you who don't know, is command control computers and cyber, and ISR is intel surveillance and reconnaissance. So I'll pass it over to Mr. Harris.
In order to answer that, basically what we did was looked at everything that's going on. Predominantly, losing access to the electromagnetic spectrum directly degrades our information advantage and significantly reduces the effectiveness of C4 ISR systems. This creates a critical dependency. Spectrum enables network delivery and of essential capabilities, and conversely, networks are required to effectively manage and deliver spectrum access to users. Maintaining spectrum superiority is therefore paramount to mission success. Thank you.
I was going to say,
Oh, okay, here.
to reinforce what Dave said, spectrum superiority is a critical to spectrum to C4 because it has a high bandwidth C4I SR communications, data transfer, and GPS accuracy. The contested or denied spectrum degrades C4I by disrupting communications, reducing situational awareness, delaying decision-making, increasing friendly fire risk, and potentially leading to mission failure. Okay? Without spectrum, nothing exists anymore in the 21st century. So you use it every day, but you're not realizing that you're using spectrum all day long. So it's critical. Okay?
As it's already been stated, networked C4 ISR is key to how we are able to maneuver and key to how we're able to execute our warfighting functions. If we're fully invested in radio frequency transport, we have to ensure that our communications plan to maintain a fully interlaced C4 ISR plan is robust and resilient. So we rely heavily on redundancy and how to enable that as proficiently and actually as efficiently as possible without stepping on our friendly forces.
If you don't, my apologies. If we do not maintain superiority and effectiveness in utilizing the spectrum, the RF portion, it greatly hinders the ability to use these networks that we've built. We can have the best network, the best equipment on a ship floating out in the middle of the Pacific, but if they're operating in a comms denied or degraded environment, that does us no good because we have no way to get information to the ship or from the ship about the environment that they're heading into. So it's critical that we maintain superiority and our ability to flex and utilize multiple lines of communication throughout the spectrum.
Cool. I'm going to try to avoid using critical because I've heard it 4 times right now. All right, so the key word is networked, right? Networked means you've got a bunch of different systems that are all connected in some way or another. At some point, that physical tether is going to break and it's going to rely on the electromagnetic spectrum. Whether or not it's a UAV, artillery systems, or a headquarters using line-of-sight transmissions, there is a break in that physical connection, and it needs the electromagnetic spectrum in order to make that connection viable. Without that, then some portion of that is going to fail. It may be your artillery, it may be your forward observer, it may be the headquarters unable to pass critical information. So it becomes absolutely imperative that we maintain spectrum dominance on today's battlefield.
All right, I'm going to take a quick shot at that one. Like I said, I'm not a spectrum expert, so I would kind of relate spectrum to having air superiority. And some of that seems simple, but if we don't have superiority with spectrum, and spectrum does a lot more than we think about it, it's just communications or data transmission, but it's also microwave, it's your ability to see, it's a lot of other things you don't think about. But what we're talking here is our ability to communicate with devices, equipment, and to communicate as well and transmit data. And we've kind of said it, it supports our functions or warfighting functions, and some of those are simple things of moving equipment. Command and control is a very critical piece, and that really underpins a lot of the other functions important for military operations. So your sustainment pieces and your fires pieces, which can make or break, a battle or an engagement, or even simple maneuver operations. So, all right, we're going to move to the next question. What specific types of automations, such as AI-driven conflict resolution or predictive modeling, could reduce the burden on spectrum managers and improve responsiveness?
In answer to that one, basically, I would say that what we're looking at is Automated Electromagnetic Operations Environment, or EMOE, delivers a real-time electromagnetic operating picture, integrating spectrum threat awareness directly into the commander's common operational picture, or we also call it as COP. Optimized electronic warfare, or EW, resource allocation, facilitates dynamic and synchronized electromagnetic warfare, maximizing the efficient use of power and frequency resources to maintain spectrum superiority. Thank you.
So let me start with AI. AI-driven has three elements to help spectrum managers. We have predictive modeling, automated conflict resolution, and dynamic spectrum access. So by doing predictive modeling, we anticipate interference so that we can optimize the frequency allocation within the United States and possessions. Then we have automated conflict resolution. We have to quickly resolve the frequency deconfliction without manual intervention, and AI helps us do that. And then we have dynamic spectrum access, which automates the entire spectrum so that we can actually do real-time spectrum management. Right now, what we have is a lot of Excel spreadsheets, but AI is helping us do real-time spectrum management. These are the elements that we need to use to reduce the workload and improve responsiveness. Thank you.
Hey, team. Artificial intelligence is very fascinating to me. I know it's in front of, it needs to be in front of our efforts to modernize our force and to modernize our capabilities. AI and machine learning are near and dear to our hearts in the spectrum management operations field. So I don't want to pretend anything otherwise other than that. With regard to AI, I recently learned that one of the Army's organizations who's really been at the front edge of adapting and protecting and defending our use of the electromagnetic spectrum on the battlefield for quite some time now. They're in front of an effort to produce waveform modeling or waveform adapting capabilities. And I think that's key because I think a lot of vendors, or actually some certain or various vendors or capability developers in our field understand that waveform interoperability is key for interoperations or interoperability with joint coalition partners. And if nothing changes with regard to electromagnetic spectrum, you still have the same frequency, the same bandwidth that's there. how to efficiently use that and to increase your capabilities in the same place in the same time. That's primarily what we're trying to leverage waveform management and waveform adaptation for. So I think that forthcoming capability is very interesting, and I think that'll be very significant to our progress on that.
For AI in spectrum management for the Navy, there's two pieces, some of which has already been talked about by Mr. Marcial or Mr. Harris. The first part is the Common Operational Picture, your COP. Using AI to assign your JCOI, your Joint Communications Electronics Operating Instructions, or for the Navy, our OPTAS comms, assigning those to your units that are not only operating in USNP, but also in international waters or other areas where the Navy tends to operate, lets us see what those units are using and also compare it to the environment that they're going into, which will be fed partially from intel into what potential interference or problems they may encounter going into certain areas that we may miss. Because as humans, we can only process so much, we can only think of so many things. AI, you feed it all the information, and it's going to compare it. Again, so that could give a better understanding of the actual electromagnetic operating environment on the ground, and also allow us to provide that picture to our commanders and allow them to see what's going on. The second piece would be, as Mr. Marcial stated, the actual spectrum management work, not just providing the picture to commanders, but actually assigning records, deconflicting amongst the services as to who is using what and where, what restricted frequencies there might be, making that a little bit easier on each of us.
All right, so realistically, they've said about everything that needs to be said, but I'm on the panel, so I'm going to talk for a tiny bit. So we talked about the planning and frequency assignment, but I'm just going to paint a small picture real quick. Imagine that you've got an emitter out on the battlefield that you need to, once again, close that link in your network. Right now we have dynamic frequency selection, which kind of reads the environment, picks a frequency that's good, and just blasts it out because, hey, it's going to work. It's going to make that connection. One of the issues that seems to be had with those systems is it doesn't necessarily care about what's around it. It doesn't have the ability to plan and to see, oh, well, there are actually friendly transmissions beyond that receiver. There are other enemy transmissions coming in. So coupling the DFS, dynamic frequency selection, with some sort of predictive analysis or AI that will actively fight against and predict what the enemy's about to do and what friendly emitters are on the battlefield would greatly aid on the front edge. Oh.
All right, so I think this question kind of touches on a lot of opportunities to modernize our spectrum. And we have a lot of examples of how that can help improve spectrum. It's really important that we do modernize at pace with some of our competition out there who are, in some cases, copying what's out there and using what's available in commercial space. Military is a little bit slower to adapt, to modernize, especially U.S. military, and some of the processes we have to go through to implement new technology. But a lot of this really helps us get out of the manual ways of doing things, and I see it as a large gap that we need to fill quickly. That's why I'm glad to see a lot of young, junior ROTC folks out here, and I would just put a plug in to, look at if any of you are interested in AI or data analytics or just simple automation. It's a good area to get into, and think of the many things that you can apply that to. Spectrum, I think, needs it. Like I said, spectrum is huge. It's foundational to a lot of the things we do, and not a lot of people understand how important spectrum and EMS is. So with that, I'm going to move to the next question. What are the biggest challenges to achieving true interoperability in spectrum management with coalition forces beyond NATO, and how can these be overcome?
Within the Indo-PACOM or Asia-Pacific theater, thank you, basically to enhance interoperability and coordination within the theater, establishing a security cooperation framework analogous to NATO or similar to NATO is recommended. Furthermore, a standardized process similar to the U.S. DD Form 1494, which how we captures our certification documentation for our equipment, is needed for nations participating in exercises and events within the United States and possessions. And successful integration of equipment and systems hinges on confirmed spectrum compatibility. Therefore, comprehensive equipment certification is vital, underpinned by thorough risk assessments, or as we look at it in the Navy, as spectrum supportability risk assessments, or also known as SSRAs, and a completion of DD Form 1494 to ensure certification success. Thank you.
Okay, so the biggest challenge we have is that in the United States, we have the National Telecommunications Information Administration, the Department of Commerce, who license all of the military and federal government in the United States. Now just imagine, you have to build a piece of equipment in the United States according to the Department of Commerce table of allocation, okay, which gives you all the bands, all the station class, and how you're supposed to build that piece of equipment. So that's one. There are 193 tables of allocation worldwide, according to the International Telecommunications Union in Geneva. Every country has a table of allocation. However, every table of allocation is different. Example is, if you take a television in the United States and you ship it to the United Kingdom, it is not going to work because that signal is different from the United States, okay? They're all different. If you buy equipment in the United States and you take it to Japan, that radio will work, but it's not allocated according to the rules and regulations of that country. So spectrum is a sovereign right of a country to manage. So when we look at the biggest challenges, it's really the national regulations, it's incompatibility of equipment, it's the lack of data standards. Right now, within the spectrum management community and the electronic warfare community, we have over 150 data standards. That means that they don't talk to each other. So we have to manually do everything. Excuse me. So what we need to overcome these challenges is we need protocols, we need pre-mission spectrum agreements, and we need to invest in automation using artificial intelligence. And we need to work on getting better equipment and better radios that have software-defined capabilities. Thank you.
This is an awesome question, and I'm in total agreement with Dave and Bob's responses because it's all packaged into everything that we do across the services and among the services. I think the key, I'd like to emphasize on this point, the key is through the process of accepting each other's sovereignty and understanding how we're intending to intermingle forces that train as they fight. If we don't get past if we don't execute proper prior planning and ultimately building stronger partnerships with our allies and partners, our coalition partners, then we're at risk of allowing geopolitical tensions, disagreements, perceived violations of each other's sovereignty to get in the way of enabling our forces. So I think to resolve this, it's important to get to ensure that the proper planning is done, to ensure that the appropriate amount of priority is given to everything that needs to interoperate on the in the operating area. Thank you.
For this particular issue, just like Mr. Harris alluded to, there's not a conglomerate, as it were, like there is over in the European. It's when you deal with NATO. I was in Naples for 3 years or so doing spectrum work there with 6th Fleet, and we were able to work with NATO and the different countries, and there was a standardization. Over here, there's issues that are both technical and procedural. Technical, the equipment, like Mr. Marcial said, we developed the equipment, but some of it may be classified and you can't share everything, and we don't want to share everything with partners and allies, which that's its own reasons. But that leads to issues of not being able to turn on a piece of gear when you go into another country's territorial waters for the Navy or on their land. And you turn it on, you cause interference, and that has its own issues. And procedural as well. The U.S., we have procedures for spectrum management. We have rules and regulations. And other countries don't necessarily have theirs as fleshed out as we do, or they don't quite align. So those are the two largest issues that I see on this challenge.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's the thing about being like number 5 on a 5-person panel, is everybody's essentially said everything that I would say. I'll put it in a different light. The U.S. is the best at what it does, hands down. Whether it's radio technology or weapon systems, we're hands down the best. What that means for our partners and allies, though, is there will always be a technology gap. And if I can bring it to something that some of us are more familiar with, backwards compatibility. A lot of times our radios, our systems come out and they're not backwards compatible with the system that came before it. Quite frankly, some of our allies and partners are using radio systems from 40 years ago, and there's no interoperability that exists. So we have the choice of either coming up with something that's backwards compatible or just handing them millions of dollars worth of equipment. And I think in the end, it's probably better to come up with something that's backwards compatible, which will also enable spectrum mobility and agility on the battlefield, so that if what's working right now, we can change the frequency and the waveform in order to continue to communicate in a contested and denied environment. For everybody else that plays video games, your PS5 was backwards compatible with the PS4. Everybody else is playing with PS3s. So it'd be great if we could get something that we could all work with. Cool.
All right, the only thing I'll add to that is that we talked about interoperability with coalition. We don't know what that coalition is going to be, so we're trying to figure out a puzzle that we don't know all the pieces to yet. Another issue is we talked unwillingness to share, both on our part and whatever that coalition partner or partners group is going to be. And then along all of that, processes are not standard. So without standardizing the processes, some countries don't have a process, right? When you get into those, it's just like, okay, it's Wild West. And then for the most part, everyone is doing it manually. So that's all I'll add to that one. Yeah. Oh, sure. You got to say one? 1 second.
Sorry, but I had an oh, by the way, hearing everything, and I just wanted to expound on some of the things that was said, which they're all agreeing. I agree with all the statements, but I just want to say every 2 years within the Hawaiian area, we are involved in a major exercise that are multinational exercise. Right now, as it stands, as of today, we have 43 countries plus that is going to be participating in this exercise, and it's called Rim of the Pacific. And we prepping for it. It's going to be conducted out here in the Hawaiian area in 2026. And we're faced with these type of issues every 2 years, and trying to capture all these countries' requirements so that we can see how we can interoperate together. It's something we need, and I agree with Bob and the rest of the panel that AI, I believe, might help us or assist us in gaining this information better. Thank you, sir.
All right, next question. The World Radio Communication Conference, WRC, decisions often involve compromises between military, commercial, and scientific interest. How do these outcomes impact the Department of War's ability to operate globally, and what strategies can be employed to protect critical spectrum access?
Operational effectiveness is specific frequency bands may be limited to operating near land-based infrastructure, while existing radar plans and guidance partially mitigate these challenges. Unforeseen issues and potential restrictions could impact import testing, repairs, as well as pre-deployment checks. It is important to recognize that the WARC, or World Radio Communications Conference, or WARC, process is not advisable, is not adversarial. Its agenda and outcomes apply equally to all nations. This necessitates proactive, long-range planning by U.S. planners to anticipate and adapt to evolving spectrum regulations. This is the necessary consequence of maintaining strong alliances and participating in a collaborative international forum. Thank you.
So let me give you a little background. The World Radio Conference is held in Geneva every 3 to 4 years. And that's when 193 nations get together to divide the spectrum, okay, on how they're going to use the spectrum worldwide. They can either accept it or they don't have to accept it. To give you an idea, I think it was in the war 2000 is when the International Mobile Telecommunications 2000 came into effect. The countries decided to have 3 bands so that you could use your cell phone worldwide. And that's how we came up with 3 bands to use worldwide so that your cellular phones could work anywhere in the world. Of course, you have to pay for some usage, but the bands are available, okay? Whatever is decided at the World Radio Conference is how everything is divided all over the world. The problem is, excuse me, that in 1975, the Department of War owned 90% of the spectrum in the United States, okay? Through technology, we were losing the spectrum, excuse me, and we were selling it off. Congress was selling it off. I think it was in 2018, the United States sold the 1810 to 1855 spectrum. We generated $47.5 billion to the economy. So when the United States loses or auctions spectrum, it's revenue. So we need to invest in AI in order to protect what we currently have so that we don't lose it to the private sector, because that's why the private sector wants it. Somewhere down the line, you're going to have the next generation of spectrum, either 7G or 8G, where you'll have holograms, okay? It's coming. And it's all because we're losing the spectrum in the United States to the private sector. So we have to be very careful and protect and argue with good data why we cannot afford to lose that spectrum in the United States. And of course, if we sell it in the United States or auction it to the private sector, it has a ripple effect through all the other countries in the world, because they will do the same thing. If the United States could do it, then we could do it. So that means that if you buy equipment in the United States and we sell off that equipment, we may not be able to use that same equipment in other countries. Thank you.
Awesome answers so far. I know for our part at U.S. Army Pacific, we view the Worldwide Radio Conference, hey, all eyes and ears are on the WRC when that happens biannually. For our Army's capabilities, Army's efforts, that represents basically it largely represents the first part of our spectrum management life cycle, and that is establish, define policy and guidance, right? So if we don't have things that are, if the great benefits of the WRC do not empower or do not help shape legislation for how the spectrum resources are used across the globe, then we have issues, right? We obviously have issues. I think one of the primary benefits of the principle of those compromises and agreements through the WRC is that in worst case scenarios, they'll help to enable interoperability or the use of certain capabilities to support humanitarian assistance or disaster relief or defense. I think that's one of the huge, or those are some of the huge benefits from those compromises. As far as how the outcomes, what strategies can be employed to protect critical access, well, I honestly think continuing to train and enable our users of the electromagnetic spectrum on how to use the EMS efficiently and proficiently, like effectively, in order to deliver the capabilities that they have, I think that's paramount. Thank you.
So for the Navy, a lot of our issues in this regard, can stem from the private sector wanting to use certain parts of the spectrum they haven't used before, especially when it comes to cell phones and things like that. Some of those bands were primary military previously, and we developed certain systems, radars, things of that nature that worked in those bands. And say a sailor inadvertently turns on a piece of gear on a ship, not knowing any better, he wipes out cell phone service in a certain area, and then commanders, other people get phone calls and angry emails from our private sector counterparts. So it's just about making sure that as they move further and further into bands that were previously only military, that there's ways that they can build in protections on both sides. Not only allow air equipment to be used at times in port if you need to test it, but in the case of inadvertent activation, that their own systems are not essentially fried. Because usually a lot of their systems it's very low power, and anything that we use tends to be high power, especially in those bands. And it's unfortunate, but we do cause some issues with that.
Yeah, so the Worldwide Radio Conference and what we decide gets used where presents a challenge. It always has, always will. Spectrum will continue to get auctioned off. We'll get narrower and narrower bands that we can operate in. But with every challenge comes an opportunity. We rely on that frequency separation from everything else. But the opportunity now presents itself. How can we incorporate our communications, our data transfer into existing infrastructure so that it not only passes the data we need it to pass, so that it not only performs the duty that we need it to perform, but it also obfuscates it from enemy or adversarial action and observation, right? So finding new ways to utilize what's already there is the opportunity that we have whenever the WRC takes over different places. I'll give you not necessarily a real world example, but an abstraction. Right? Let's say we go to some place and hey, the WRC has said this frequency used for my garage door is for garage doors. Well, if we can find some way to utilize that instead of sticking to this frequency over here, they said, hey, this is a frequency for guided missiles. Your adversary, as they're observing the frequencies being used, are going to see garage doors and guided missile. Which one do you think they're going to instantly target? So not that we're wanting them to target civilian infrastructure, but if we can utilize pre-existing frequencies and bands to perform the duties that we need them to perform, we will protect ourselves and we will protect our allies and enable us to gain the initiative and enter into the enemy decision cycle before they know what's going on.
All right, a lot of great answers for this question. I think everybody came prepared for that one. The only thing I have to add is protecting that spectrum or frequency space for the military is important to our plans. I'm the Strategy and Plans Division Chief, and as we plan, we need to plan for that spectrum usage like we were talking about with other partner, coalition partners. And the better, we talked a little also about using automation and AI. And so some of those things can give us that predictive analysis and predictive planning that we need to help defend the spectrum space, and just forecasting what we would need in the future should a certain plan kick off. So that's the only thing I'll add there for the predictive analysis and planning piece of it. All right, I'm going to move into our last question. So achieving spectrum superiority requires a holistic approach encompassing technology, doctrine, training, and international cooperation. Which of these areas requires the most urgent attention and why? And I'm just going to cover those again. Technology, doctrine, training, and international cooperation.
The military is investing in advanced technologies and personnel training. However, a lack of updated, unified doctrine hinders our ability to effectively integrate these capabilities and to succeed and achieve success. In a high-end conflict, prioritizing doctrine development is therefore critical. From a spectrum perspective, training represents the most pressing need. This includes increasing the number of qualified spectrum managers and operators, while cybersecurity rightfully receives significant attention. Spectrum management has been comparatively under-resourced. Even the most secure networks is ineffective if its transmission path is compromised or degraded, and operators lack the skills to identify and mitigate interference. We must prioritize spectrum training across all levels of commands and increase throughput of our naval schools. Furthermore, offering spectrum managers training to our partner nations will enhance their ability to manage their own frequency and spectrum requirements, strengthening interoperability and collective security. Thank you.
All right. I would say that the most urgent attention is technology. Right now, Spectrum supports the 5 domains: air, land, sea, space, and cyber. So when you leave this room today, or when you're walking or using your cell phone, ask the question to ChatGPT: can the 5 domains exist without Spectrum? And the answer is no. So technology is the most important that requires attention. Thank you.
Hey team, not to devalue any of the previous answers, all of these areas require all require attention and urgency at any given time. What I've come to notice is that if you don't have the appropriate attention put into training, ensuring that your your users are fully proficient at using the equipment that they have to use, you don't have time to make up for that. Before the game or before the mission, if you missed a don't want to overuse the C word, critical. Sergeant Major, I apologize. But if you realize that you didn't have the opportunity to train or to meet an exercise objective or answer do something in the stress of a training environment or a simulated testing environment, you feel it affects your preparedness, your sense of readiness, right? And it's going to affect it's just going to affect each person differently. But I think because of the time, the implied tasks involved in training and getting ready for missions, I think training is that thing for me, and for how we need to ensure that we give optimum resources like time to our users as soon as possible. Thanks.
From a strictly spectrum point of view, I concur with Mr. Orlowski and Mr. Harris. Training is it's a very critical component of what we need to do and focus on. However, also if we broaden out slightly to the EMSO piece, Electromagnetic Spectrum Operations, which incorporates spectrum, but we're only a piece of it. There's also the electromagnetic warfare EW side to it, or piece of it. I think as a whole in the EMSO world, and not just spectrum, we need to get the doctrine solidified, and not just for us, but also with their counterparts. Relatively speaking, EMSO, including the EW side, is relatively not new, but somewhat has only been recently brought to the forefront that we need to include our EW counterparts, our Intel counterparts, and have fully functional EMSO cells. The doctrine for that is not quite where it needs to be. And without the doctrine, the operators don't know what to do. You have nothing to train to. You have nothing to tell the managers and the operators, if this happens, you make this report to these people, or these effects will trickle down. So in that perspective, I think the doctrine from the EMSO side would be the most critical.
All right, yeah, these are all excellent points, excellent opinions, things definitely to take home. On my side, I think doctrine and tech are the things that require the most attention. Quite frankly, the doctrine is cumbersome. It is difficult to deal with, and it delays almost every single operation and every single innovation that happens. Technology, because we just have to stay ahead, 2-3 steps ahead of our adversaries. But you also have to understand that they all have to grow together. Think to yourself, which one can I actually leave behind? Can I leave behind training? Probably not. Can I leave behind the technology? Absolutely not. Can we just let doctrine sit stagnant for 30 years before we decide to update it to keep pace with everything else? No. They all have to grow together. Otherwise, you create vulnerabilities that are going to cost lives in the next conflict.
All right, all great answers again. So for me, I'm on the technology side. Just as far as return on investment, I feel we do all of those areas, and each of those areas can provide significant benefit if done well and together with the other areas. But for me, just seeing the technology not progress as fast as we would have liked it to progress, and then the availability of new technology today, and just making the best use of that, I think would produce the best return on investment. So I know we've hit time. I would like to again thank all the panel members. I think we do have a few more minutes to take maybe 1 or 2 questions if we've got any. So opening it up, if we've got any questions. Going on? Okay, we got one question over here. Go ahead and step to the mic up here, please.
Microphone to the center. Right there.
Yeah. Oh.
Wow, so tall. Okay, so based on what I've understood, spectrum is like the communications of all the technologies that are like covered. And in the Worldwide Radio Center, you guys divide up spectrum to have it for different countries. And the main problem that you're having is that internationally, there's like no set standard for communication, so technologies are having a hard time on communicating and maintaining information shared between allies and communities. And what you have described is that your focus would be on technology and doctrine, but how are your plans on like doctrine specifically? How are you planning to make sure that all of the people are trained on the same doctrine and that technology is standardized to everyone?
Take a crack.
Awesome question. Excellent question. At least for our doctrine, at least at the service level for U.S. Army, we are able to do rapid revision changes for like really urgently needed changes to doctrine. So that's definitely a plus, and we've seen that happen several times in the past few years. To get rapid revision changes at the joint service level, I think happens almost as frequently. So any like urgently needed changes to doctrine can happen as long as they have, the key word here is the right attention, the right sense of urgency by the leading service or the joint staff. I hope that is a good answer for your question, and an awesome question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, we had one up here first, and then we'll hit one of you gentlemen back there. So.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Lieutenant Colonel Brittany McCrone, 94th AAMDC G6. So we know if we go into high-intensity conflict, we're going to be in a degraded, contested environment. We also know that we're going to need that reliable and resilient pace plan for options for our commanders to be able to make those decisions. And we know that our adversaries are going to be able to basically intercept a lot of our frequencies or communications via the spectrum. So do you see the spectrum management kind of like opening up the restrictions and just kind of allowing you to jump and hop to different bands? Or do we see it kind of becoming more managed, more restrictive in that conflict?
That's a good question. Okay? In time of a conflict, the spectrum is going to be managed even harder than what it is today because the adversary is using the same space. There is only one spectrum. It's just divided differently. But it's going to have to be managed more than we manage it more during exercises today. What we need is a tool using, hopefully, AI that will prevent will let us use our spectrum and deter the adversary from using the same spectrum. That's what we need. We can't do that today. Okay? Neither they or us have that capability right now. But we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. That's a good question.
I would add that the gloves would be off, right? It would be Wild West in some cases. So when we need to do critical things like, I'm saying critical again because it is, decision conferences, for example, right, for AAMDC detection, and then for employment of forces, it's force direction and things that, at the strategic level, the nation is, employing along those functions again. But we are going to be using spectrum in all of those spaces, and really we're talking the wireless communications for some of those assets that we'll have in different locations that may not be connected to a terrestrial landline. But that's all I had to add, is that it would be a gloves off situation. There would be our own spectrum fratricide, right? And that's part of just not having the tools. We're on spreadsheet and phone calls trying to do the best we can to manage, right? And these are the managers that are going to be in that fight across your domains of air, land, sea, and then PACOM and the Marines across those areas, and even space. So, and space has a lot of spectrum usage as well and importance. But all right, good question. we'll just go with one of you. Who was first? Right now? Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi there. William Sokol from Progress Federal. To what extent do you think the DISA EMBM, the Electromagnetic Battle Management System, would fill the gap that you guys have articulated in that COP? Thank you.
It's a good subject you brought up. EMBM is the Electromagnetic Battle Management Joint, okay? It is a program that was developed by DISA, PEO, with US Stratcom. As it stands right now, EMBM-J only shows a COP of what's being utilized using Spectrum 21 and other databases. The problem that we see with EMBM, which we're trying to rectify, is that the COP that it shows, it's taking data from Spectrum 21, which is the master database for the United States military, and it plots it on a map. The issue is that that's not where the folks are at, okay? The assignment shows it on the map, but they're moving around the battle space, okay? And that's what the issue we have with the EMBM. So what we're doing with DISA PEO is we are looking at redoing EMBM so that it supports more of the spectrum management process, okay? Which is the Army and the Marine Corps uses the Joint Electromagnetic Spectrum, the Joint Communications Electronic Operating System, which has call signs, frequencies, pyrotechnics, and suffixes. The Navy uses the OPTASCOMs, the Operational Task Orders, which has all the Navy ships, the links, the radars, and that's used. That is automated by the Real-Time Spectrum Management Operations, RTSO. However, in order to notify the fleet, it has to go out by message traffic. The OPTASCOMs right now is 128 pages long. We're supposed to be automated, but we're not, okay? And then you have the Air Force using the air tasking orders, okay? It's an Excel spreadsheet. So what we've done is we've asked DISA, we sat DISA down, PEO, and said, look, you need to take all this paperwork, Microsoft Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, and we need to automate this so that we have one tool so that we can notify the fleet that something has changed on an assignment, real time. Today, it takes us about 3 or 4 days to change a frequency and notify everybody. So that's what we're doing with EMBM-J, okay? EMBM-J started with 3 modules, which is the SA module, situational awareness, then the DS module, decision module, and then the C2 module. Well, as of 4 months ago, they did away with that. Now it's all one software to do spectrum management and electronic warfare, okay? Hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you. Apologize, we're not going to be able to take any more questions. Being told we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for attending. Thank you again for the panel members and experience. Hope everybody got something out of this today. Aloha.